There is a strength that only the lowered head can carry. The most wicked king in Israel's history walks down a hillside to claim a vineyard he never paid for. The grapes are not yet ripe. The dew is still on the leaves. The soil beneath his sandals is still wet with the blood of the man he had murdered to take it. He has waited for this morning. The body has been dragged outside the city walls. The false witnesses have been paid. The throne has finally taken what the throne could not own. And just as he sets his foot on the stolen land, a figure rises out of the heat. Elijah, the prophet of fire, the prophet who had once silenced the reigns over Israel for 3.5 years with a single word, carrying in his mouth a sentence that should have ended a dynasty before sundown. In the place where dogs licked the blood of Naboth, dogs shall lick thy blood, even thine. 1 Kings 21:19. The king has been found, the judgment has arrived, and Ahab cannot even mount a defense. Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? He says. 1 Kings 21:20. And what happens next is the verse that undoes every assumption you have ever held about who divine mercy will reach. Because King Ahab, the man who sold himself to evil, who married Jezebel, who introduced the worship of Baal into the holiest land on earth, who corrupted every priest, who built every altar to every false god, does not lift his sword. He does not laugh in the prophet's face. He does not call for the man of God to be killed before nightfall. He tears his royal robes with his own hands. He puts on rough sackcloth against his skin. He fasts. He stops eating. He walks softly through his own palace as a man who has finally been undressed. And the Almighty, the God who had just sworn ruin upon his entire dynasty, pauses, listens, and turns to his prophet with a question that should not exist in this story. Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? 1 Kings 21:29. What kind of mercy is this that will pause for a tyrant? Every choice plants a seed. No man harvests what he did not sow. To feel the weight of what just happened, you have to understand the ground he was standing on. The vineyard of Naboth was not real estate. In ancient Israel, ancestral land was sacred. The Hebrew word for inheritance, nachalah, did not mean property in any sense the modern ear can grasp. It meant the portion that God himself had cut out for a family, a piece of the promised land itself, woven into a man's name, his lineage, his place in the covenant of Abraham. To sell it was to sell your share in the people of God. Leviticus 25:23 records God's own claim over the soil. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine. Every vineyard, every field, every olive grove in Israel was on loan from heaven. So when Naboth said, "The Lord forbid it me, that I should give the inheritance of my fathers unto thee," in 1 Kings 21:3, he was not refusing a transaction. He was refusing apostasy. To surrender his vineyard was to surrender his place in the covenant of God. He would rather die than sell. And he did. Ahab understood all of this, and he wanted the land anyway. What the Hebrew reveals here is that Ahab's sin was not greed. It was something older. It was the same sin that began in the garden, the conviction that what belongs to God can be taken by force without consequence. Numbers 32:23 names it without ornament. Be sure your sin will find you out. The Hebrew verb there, matzah, does not mean to be discovered. It means to be hunted down, to be overtaken, to be cornered. Sin is not a record of what you did. Sin is a tracker. It follows. It walks behind you in the marketplace. It waits at the door of your house. It studies the route you take to forget it. And when Elijah appears on the bloodstained soil, he is not the beginning of Ahab's reckoning. He is the moment it finally catches up. The Apostle Paul will repeat this law 1,000 years later in the language of farming. Galatians 6:7. Be not deceived, God is not mocked, for whatsoever a man soweth, that shall he also reap. Notice what Paul does not say. He does not say sometimes. He does not say usually. He says whatsoever. Every action, every word, every secret. The harvest law is older than the covenant. It is older than Sinai. It is older than the patriarchs. It is woven into the architecture of creation itself. You did not invent it. You cannot escape it. Every action releases a seed into the spiritual soil, and somewhere in your future that seed is already growing. The voice that disturbs you may be the only voice in the world trying to save you. There is a moment every person reaches when the harvest of their hidden choices finally arrives at the door. It does not always come dressed as a prophet. Sometimes it arrives as a phone call you did not want to answer. Sometimes as a diagnosis spoken in a quiet office. sometimes as a marriage falling silent across the dinner table, sometimes as a child who will no longer look you in the eye, sometimes as a number in a bank account that has not lied to you in years. But it comes. The vineyard you took, by compromise, by silence, by a small betrayal you thought no one saw, eventually grows grapes that are bitter to the taste. And when that day arrives, you will have only two postures available to you. You can defend or you can break. Ahab's first instinct, if we are honest, is the one we recognize. He had spent a lifetime defending. He had built walls of denial high enough to hide a murder. He had a queen at his side whose entire genius was justifying what he had already done. Every system in his life was structured to protect his pride. And yet, when Elijah's words land, something shatters that no system can repair. The Hebrew text in 1 Kings 21:27 says he went softly. 2 words. In the original, halakat, to walk slowly, with the head down. He moved through his own palace as a man who no longer carried his title. He let the sackcloth touch his skin where the silk used to be. He fasted. He stopped giving orders. He stopped justifying. He stopped explaining. Hebrews 12:6 names what this moment actually is. For whom the Lord loveth he chasteneth, and scourgeth every son whom he receiveth. Read that twice. The voice that exposes you is not the voice that hates you. The voice that hates you leaves you alone. The voice that hates you lets you keep the vineyard. The voice that loves you does the hardest thing any voice can do. It tells you the truth while there is still time. Revelation 3:19 will say it again, this time from the throne of the risen Christ himself. As many as I love, I rebuke and chasten. Be zealous therefore and repent. You have to understand this. Conviction is not condemnation. Conviction is the mercy of being interrupted before the cliff. The prophet who shows up at your vineyard is the kindest thing that has happened to you in years. He is the warning you should have ignored 1,000 other voices to hear. He is the friend who finally tells you what your other friends would not. He is the diagnosis that arrives in time. He is the sleepless night that will not let you forget. And when he arrives, and one day in some form he will, the question is not whether you have sinned. He already knows. The question is whether you have the courage Ahab had to walk softly. Mercy is not a measurement of you. It is a revelation of God. Here is the pivot the entire story turns on. The God who had just sworn destruction, who had named the dogs, named the place, named the dynasty, named every male child who would die, pauses. And the reason he gives shakes the architecture of justice itself. Seest thou how Ahab humbleth himself before me? Because he humbleth himself before me, I will not bring the evil in his days. 1 Kings 21:29. Read those words slowly. Heaven moved, not because Ahab paid restitution, not because he gave the vineyard back to the surviving sons of Naboth, not because he abolished the worship of Baal that afternoon. Heaven moved because a man who had no right to mercy bent. Joel 2:13 reveals what God was actually looking for. Rend your heart and not your garments, and turn unto the Lord your God. For he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and of great kindness, and repenteth him of the evil. The torn cloth was the symbol. The torn heart was the substance. Heaven does not respond to performance. Heaven responds to a spirit that has finally broken open. Psalm 51:17 puts the entire economy of mercy into a single line. David, after his own great failure with Bathsheba and Uriah, declared, "The sacrifices of God are a broken spirit, a broken and a contrite heart, O God, thou wilt not despise." Lamentations 3:22-23 will sing the same truth from the ash heap of fallen Jerusalem. It is of the Lord's mercies that we are not consumed, because his compassions fail not. They are new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness. Every morning, even after a vineyard, even after a murder, even after years of running. James 2:13 will close the case in apostolic Greek. Mercy rejoiceth against judgment. Mercy stands up in the courtroom and triumphs. But the revelation cannot end in the Old Testament, because Ahab's mercy was only deferred. The judgment was paused, not cancelled. The bill was passed to the next generation. Exodus 20:5 had warned this, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the 3rd and 4th generation. And so the question hangs in the air for 1,000 years. What mercy is large enough to cancel a judgment, not just delay it? The answer walks out of the gates of Jerusalem on a Friday afternoon carrying a beam of wood. There is another innocent man, falsely accused by a corrupt religious council, dragged outside the city walls, executed so that a corrupt kingdom could keep its vineyard. Only this time, the innocent man is the Son. Hebrews 9:26. Now once in the end of the world hath he appeared to put away sin by the sacrifice of himself. And what the blood of Naboth could only avenge, the blood of Christ could erase. Ahab was given a pause. You are being offered a pardon. The vineyard of your guilt is no longer the place where dogs come to lick blood at sundown. It is the place where an empty tomb stands open in the morning light. The same God who paused for the worst king is the God who erased the verdict for you. What you tolerate today becomes the inheritance of those who follow you. What you surrender today becomes their freedom. So hear this carefully. The most wicked king in Israel's history was met with mercy, not because his sin was small, because his heart finally tore. The same offer is on the table for you, in this moment, on whatever ground you are standing on. The vineyard you took, the compromise you protected, the version of yourself you have been defending for years, the harvest you have been pretending you would not have to pay for. Lay it down, walk softly. There is no posture more powerful in the universe than the lowered head of a person who has finally stopped explaining. Psalm 46:10 has been waiting in the silence of this story the whole time. Be still and know that I am God. Not strive, not perform, not explain yourself one more time. Be still. The God who paused for Ahab is not a smaller God than the God who waits for you tonight. He is the same God. The mercy that reached the vineyard is the mercy that reaches the cross. And the only question left is the question the prophet himself asked on the blood-stained soil before the sentence fell. Hast thou found me, O mine enemy? Have you been running all this time from the only voice in the world that was ever trying to save you?